Hi there, it's Leanne, the cleaner of Parazone. Hope you're all well tonight. This is take 4 because I still don't know how to edit, and I just have to start over when things go awry, like the dog fighting with the cat and other such things. So I want to tell you about my experiences I've had in my lifetime growing up, some different ghosty stories. I'm not sure if I told you about when I was a child. I had night terrors, and my parents said that I'd start crying for no reason, or I would be asleep running through the house screaming, and they couldn't wake me up. I don't have memories of those, but I believe that it must have happened since they took me to Shriners Hospital for a bunch of brain tests. And I don't know what those showed. My parents were very honest about everything. So if they showed something weird, I'm sure I would have known about it. I was told I wasn't supposed to go see The Exorcist because it would drive me insane. I did see The Exorcist, and not any more insane than I was before. So there is that. But as a child, I learned to keep my closet door shut because there was what I, as a child, called a crazy lady with wild hair living in my closet. This was an older woman, skinny, kind of sort of frail looking, with hair that needed brushed badly. I think the crazy part was because of her eyes. Her eyes looked wild. Since then, I've kind of figured out that it was, excuse me, my paternal grandmother who died before I was born, and she has followed me through most of my life, appearing occasionally. I don't know what ghosts have, this affinity they seem to have for closets and cupboards. I mean, I know cupboards, they can open and shut the door to make people aware of their presence, but why do they hang out in closets? This is a frequent story I've heard, that there's a ghost in the closet or a creature in the closet. Maybe they don't like people walking through them, so it's a safe space for them. I don't know. I do know that I've had closet experiences my whole life. So I keep the door shut because I don't want to see what's in there. Which, when I was in Germany, stationed in Germany with the army, and I had an apartment, it was called on the economy, which means that you were an apartment off post in a publicly rented apartment, not affiliated with the military in any way. And in Germany, they have, well, I guess I could say it's kind of a classist thing, but Germans do not reuse old furniture. It's sort of a mark of being wealthy enough to buy new furniture. The people who use used furniture are the poor, immigrants, and military personnel, because we don't have that same kind of thing. You know, Germans will buy new furniture, and they will set their very nice, hardly used furniture, old furniture, out on the street. On certain days of the week, the Junkers, spelled Junker, but Junkers in German, a truck will come down the road with a man walking in front of it ringing a bell. And that's the signal for everybody to put their stuff, their furniture, out on the street, and they take it and they refurbish it if need be, but generally it's very nice furniture. And they'll take it to secondhand stores where the rest of us buy our furniture. Maybe the Germans have a good idea there. Anyway, German apartments, houses, they don't have closets. They buy what is called a shrunk. I'm not going to spell it for you. It's got a little umlaut. A shrunk is a large piece of furniture, like a wardrobe, like a portable closet or a giant bookshelf or anything like that you store things in. And I had bought a shrunk from a secondhand store, and it was beautiful, and it took up most of one wall in the bedroom, and it had side parts that opened where you could hang clothes, and then in the middle it had two small cupboard doors above several drawers. And these cupboard doors locked with a little key. Well, I would leave the room and I would come back and the one cupboard door would be open. I would shut it and I would go about my business, and I would come and get, every time I'd come back, this door was open. So I dug out the key, shut it, and locked it. And when I came back in the room, the cupboard would be unlocked and open. I was trying to debunk it. I thought maybe that cupboard door was a little loose, or it was off, not quite level. I made sure there was nothing inside pushing against the door. And I could find no reason for this door to open. And after I started locking it, it would unlock and open. And no, I didn't film it. Back then was the infancy of videotape. In fact, my first VCR was a Betamax. Yeah, I picked wrong. I had a choice between VHS and Betamax, and I chose the wrong one. But it worked for us for a while. Anyway, and it'd probably be worth a lot of money now if I had it. But regardless, it wasn't something I could film like today, where, you set up a camera on a tripod, or even put your cell phone on a tripod to record the area. So all I had was the evidence of my experience. And I wasn't the only one that saw it. Other people did see it. It never opened while you were in the room. You could walk out of the room for 5 seconds and come back and it would be open. So my thought was there was some spirit that was attached to that. It came from whatever house it had been kept in previously, and they traveled with it. Maybe it was their favorite piece of furniture. I don't know. But that wasn't the only experience I had in Germany. The buildings, I was a mechanic, and the buildings that our company used to be horse stables for the German army. Maybe way back when it was the Prussian army. I don't know. They had been refitted for us. We had a very large shop that was half of the building. And along the wall, high up, were the rings that they tied the horses to and the manger that they fed them in. It had been filled in with concrete, but it was still there. It was, in our part of the building, it was probably at about 6 foot high because they had taken out the flooring and laid concrete for our shop. And the other parts of the building still had the wood floors and had much lower ceilings. In one shop, which was a small arms repair, frequently the light fixture would swing. And it would swing even when there was no vehicles moving around, there was no vibrations, there was nothing but us standing there watching it. And one of the guys would reach up and he would hold a lighter up there and the flame stayed straight. There was no breeze blowing on it. It was just swinging. But the biggest part, the most obvious thing, was in the upstairs. It was a 2-story building, and on the second floor, above all, where all the offices were, was a room that ran the half the length of the building. It stopped where our machine shop started. And it was thick wood floors, and it was the area where the cavalry soldiers used to bunk. And at some point there would have been lines after lines of bunks and lockers or trunks for their goods. And now it was all empty. And it was about, I'd say, at least 50 feet long, if not longer. It was a huge cavernous space with windows along the sides. And you would come up the stairway, and at the far end, at the very farthest end of it, was where the bathrooms were. So when we were working, especially at night, we'd have to go the length of our building to the far end, up the stair, and across the wooden floor all the way back to the other end to use the restroom. And the way that these heavy plank wood floors, you couldn't hear noise from below. It was such heavy, thick planks. But you could hear very clearly your footsteps were very loud on that wood as you crossed to the bathroom. And it was unisex bathroom, so you flipped the lock on it. At least I did. Some of the men didn't care and they didn't lock it. I did walk in on them on a number of occasions. Man. But regardless, I would go in and lock the door and go to my stall. And there was, on more than one occasion, when I would hear footsteps coming across the wooden floor, all the way from the end up to the door. And I would, of course, yell out, just a minute, or be right out, whatever. And I would come out of the stall, and there would be nobody there. There was big glass panels on either side of the door, and you could see down the length, and there was nobody there. And the way that floor was, they couldn't walk up to that door and then sneak back to the other end without being heard. And, you could look at either side. There was nobody out there in the whole bay. And this happened several times when I would be sitting there and hear the heavy footsteps walk the length of that floor and stop. So we knew that whether it was the cavalry riders from before or what it was, there were presence in that building. I never felt uncomfortable, even going up, at night, up and into that dimly lit giant room to walk to the other end. I didn't ever feel creeped out or anything, which is kind of weird because it was a very creepy place. But it was something that all of us knew that worked in that building, that, people would swap stories and we would try to debunk them and try to see what was going on. And the time I left there was no answers to it. And I believe at this point those buildings have been turned back over to the German army. So I'm not certain that I could go over there and investigate now. I would love to. But that was my German experiences. I was about 20 at the time. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that went on in the other buildings. I don't remember people talking about it, about the other buildings or the barracks. But our building definitely had something there. It's in Giessen. Giessen, at that point, it was West Germany. It was around 1980, before the reunification.